In the quiet suburban streets of Brookstone, where neighbors greeted each other with warm smiles and borrowed cups of sugar, betrayal was the last thing on my mind. My wife, Ellie, and I had settled into what I thought was a comfortable, loving routine in our little green-sided house, surrounded by the meticulously kept flower beds that were my pride. It started with the tulips. One morning, I noticed the petals scattered, stems broken. A few days later, the carnations suffered the same fate. Ellie seemed distressed, suggesting maybe raccoons were to blame. I decided to find out once and for all. Installing a CCTV camera seemed an over-the-top measure for flower vandalism, but something in me needed to solve this petty mystery. The setup was simple, one camera with night vision aimed directly at the troubled spot. I hooked it up one evening, telling Ellie it was just to catch whatever critter was messing with my garden. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and wished me luck with my little project, as she called it, and suffered the same fate. I couldn't sleep. Part of me was eager to check the footage, to finally have an answer. At around 3 a.m., unable to hold back my curiosity, I tiptoed to the living room where my laptop glowed under the dim light. What I saw on the video was no raccoon, no innocent animal scavenging for food. It was our neighbor, Mr. Thompson, clear as day under the moonlit night, deliberately tearing up the flowers. But what he did next was what turned my puzzlement into horror. He gathered the torn flowers, walked up to my front door, and rang the bell. The timestamp on the video read 3:15 a.m. I froze, listening, realizing that at that moment, Ellie was not in bed beside me. I watched as Ellie opened the door, her nightgown a ghostly silhouette against the porch light. There were hushed words I couldn't hear, a laugh that seemed too intimate, and then she took the flowers from him, her touch lingering. The clip ended with them stepping back inside, the door closing behind them, leaving me in the chilling wake of their betrayal. The realization struck me like a physical blow. The late nights Ellie had been spending at her sister's place, the sudden weekend trips, the distant look in her eyes, it all made sense now in the worst possible way. Rage filled my veins, bitter and searing. But above all, it was the cold, calculated calm that settled over me. She had invited him into our home, our sanctuary, with me just a wall away. If betrayal was the game, then revenge would be my response. This was not just about a marriage broken, it was about trust shattered, a life together mocked. As dawn broke, I sat there, plans beginning to form in my mind. I would confront her, yes, but not yet. I needed her to understand the depth of her betrayal, to feel the sting of her actions. I would dismantle the life of deceit she had built, piece by piece. Ellie and Mr. Thompson would regret the day they underestimated the man whose heart they broke. We would divorce, of course, but only after she realized that she had destroyed not just our marriage, but her own destiny as well. This was only the beginning, and the camera had given me more than just a glimpse into the darkness. It had shown me a path forward, a path paved with the stones of retribution. The morning after my shocking discovery was a haze of normalcy painted over a canvas of turmoil. Ellie hummed as she made coffee, the sun streaming in through the kitchen window, casting a halo around her that felt bitterly ironic. I watched her, every move she made a stab of betrayal. I needed to confront her, but first, I needed proof she couldn't deny. I spent the morning pretending to work from my home office while actually scouring through more video footage and banking statements. I found what I was looking for quickly enough: unexplained withdrawals and late-night charges at restaurants I knew we had never been to together. My plan began to take shape. By the time Ellie walked in with a cheerful, "Lunch is ready, love," my resolve had turned to steel. I joined her in the dining room, where she had laid out a simple meal. I took a few bites, then set my fork down, my hand steady despite the storm inside. "Ellie," I began, my voice calm, "who is Mr. Thompson to you?" The immediate flicker of her eyes, the slight stiffening of her posture, told me all I needed to know. "He's just a neighbor, you know that," she replied too quickly, a nervous laugh trying to mask her panic. Just a neighbor doesn't tear up a man's flowers at 3 a.m. and then bring them to his wife. I pushed my chair back, standing to face her. "I know, Ellie. I saw the video." Her face crumpled, all pretense crashing down as the truth hit her. I can explain," she stammered, tears welling up. I watched you, I continued, my voice low but firm. I saw him give you the flowers. I heard the laughter. How long? It's not what you think, she started, but her words faltered under my stare. How long? I demanded, the room growing colder with each word. 6 months, she whispered, a sob breaking through. It was a mistake. I was lonely, you were always busy, I didn't mean for it to. Stop, I cut her off, the finality in my voice echoing off the walls. Save your excuses. I don't need them. What I need is honesty, which you've failed to give me until now. I watched as she crumbled, her face in her hands, her body shaking with sobs. Yet, my heart, once soft for her, now felt nothing but the hard press of betrayal. I want a divorce, Ellie. And I want you out of my house by tonight, I said, each word deliberate, severing what remained of our bond. She looked up, her eyes wide with shock and pain. Please, can we talk about this? Can we go to counseling? I love you. You should have thought about love before you betrayed me, I interrupted. This is non-negotiable. I turned away from her, my mind racing ahead to the next steps. Legal arrangements, moving out, telling our friends and family, my life was about to change drastically, but first, she needed to leave. As I walked back to my office, I heard her pleading sobs fade behind me. The chapter of our life together was closing, and a new, solitary chapter was beginning, one where justice, not trust, would be my guiding principle. The road to retribution had just begun, and though I knew it wouldn't bring back what was lost, it would give me the closure I needed to move forward. The silence of the house after Ellie's departure was deafening. The walls echoed back the emptiness, the air felt heavy with the residue of betrayal. But amidst this hollow quietude, a plan of retribution took shape, a design to ensure that the deceit paid its due. First, I reached out to a lawyer, detailing my situation with clipped precision. I needed someone who wouldn't flinch at the demands for a swift and severe divorce settlement. Make it clean, make it quick, and make sure she doesn't walk away with more than the law dictates, I instructed over the phone, my voice as cold as the resolve that had settled in my bones. While the legal wheels began to turn, I shifted my focus to the more personal aspects of my revenge. Mr. Thompson, the neighbor-turned-traitor, would not escape unscathed. Armed with copies of the CCTV footage, I walked across the street to his house. The doorbell rang, slicing through the early evening calm. He answered, a cautious smile that froze when he saw the hard set of my jaw. Can I help you? He ventured, eyeing the papers in my hand. I think you've done enough helping, I said, thrusting the photos at him. The images, clearly showing his acts of vandalism and deceit, were damning. I know what you did. Ellie is gone, and now you're going to pay. Mr. Thompson paled, the papers trembling in his hands. Look, it was a mistake. I never meant to. Save it, I cut him off sharply. I'm not here to debate your intentions. You'll cease all contact with Ellie. If you don't, these go to everyone in Brookstone. How long do you think you'd last here then? His silence was answer enough. I turned on my heel, leaving him standing there, the weight of potential ruin in his hands. Back home, I sat down at my computer. Ellie's life, once intertwined with mine, was now an open book that I intended to edit harshly. I began with the financials, cancelling credit cards, redirecting bank statements, making sure she had no access to the funds she once shared freely. Each click was a seal on her fate, a lock on a door she could no longer open. But the true piece of retribution lay in a single, carefully crafted email to her employer. Dear Sir, Madam, I typed, I believe you should be aware of the unethical behavior exhibited by one of your employees. I detailed everything, from the affair to the dishonesty, not omitting her use of company time to facilitate her liaisons. I paused, my finger hovering over the send button. This was the point of no return. Once I pressed it, the cascade of consequences would be irreversible. A part of me, a distant echo of the man who had loved Ellie, hesitated. But then, the images of betrayal, the cold nights of lies, surged forward, and I pressed down. The email sent, I leaned back in my chair, the first wave of emptiness washed over by a tide of vindication. My next steps were clear. I would sell the house, move away from Brookstone, and rebuild somewhere new, somewhere untainted by memories of deceit. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the room, I felt the weight of my actions. They were heavy, laden with sorrow and anger, but necessary. This retribution was not just punishment, it was a cleansing fire, burning away the remnants of a life I once believed in. Tonight, I would sleep in a house stripped bare of love, but filled with the stark clarity of justice. Tomorrow, I would rise from the ashes, ready to forge a path forward, alone but unburdened. The road to retribution was lonely, but it led to freedom. In the weeks following Ellie's departure and the crippling of Mr. Thompson's reputation, a grim satisfaction settled over me. The house, once a symbol of communal joy, now stood as a monument to my retribution, a fortress where no betrayal could ever touch me again. But my plan, woven with the threads of vengeance, had one last act to unfurl. A new beginning loomed on the horizon with the sale of the house, but before I could turn that page, there was one final encounter I needed to orchestrate. Ellie had reached out, desperate for a chance to explain herself, to seek forgiveness perhaps. I agreed to meet, not out of any lingering affection, but to deliver the final stroke of my revenge. We met at a quiet park, neutral ground laden with the dying leaves of autumn. She was there when I arrived, sitting on a bench, her posture one of defeat. As I approached, she looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. "Thank you for coming," she began, standing to meet me. "I know after everything." "Sit down, Ellie," I interrupted, my voice void of warmth. "We're not here for pleasantries." She obeyed, swallowing hard. "I just want to say I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." "Your apologies are empty," I said, pulling out an envelope from my coat and tossing it onto the bench beside her. "This is the last of what you'll get from me. Consider it severance from a life you once took for granted." She opened the envelope, her hands shaking. Inside were documents, her name removed from any joint accounts, her belongings listed and divided, a final divorce decree colder than the November wind. "But where will I go?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not my concern," I stated flatly. "You should have thought of that before." I watched her struggle to compose herself, her eyes darting up to meet mine, searching for a sign of the man she once knew. There was none. "Is there nothing left of us worth saving?" she asked, a desperate plea. "The moment you chose him, you burnt everything we had," I replied. "There's nothing left here but ashes." As she absorbed the weight of my words, I turned to leave, but not before dropping a final revelation that would sever any lingering threads between us. "By the way," I said, pausing with calculated coldness, "I sent an email to your employer. About your misuse of company resources, your lies. Consider your career another casualty of your choices." Ellie's face drained of color, her eyes widening in shock. "You didn't." "I did. And I'm moving away, Ellie. You won't find me, and even if you do, it won't matter. I'm starting new, somewhere you and your deceit can't reach." Leaving her there, amidst the crumpled leaves and broken promises, I walked away, the final echoes of our shared past disintegrating with each step. I felt the release, a liberation from the chains of betrayal, though it was tainted with the bitter aftertaste of vengeance. Months later, I learned through mutual acquaintances that Ellie had lost her job, struggled to find new employment, and was living marginally. Mr. Thompson had moved away, shamed and ostracized by the community. And as for me? I found solace in a new town, my days filled with work and quiet evenings. But the satisfaction of retribution was fleeting. In its wake, a stark realization dawned on me: revenge had not brought back my happiness, it had merely spread the misery. And as I sat in my new, sparsely furnished apartment, overlooking a city that knew nothing of my past, I understood that true liberation wasn't in the punishment inflicted on others, but in the forgiveness one grants oneself. In the end, my revenge was complete, but the victory was hollow. Ellie and I, once bound by love, were now forever parted by the hatred of betrayal, a bitter ending to a story that had promised, once upon a time, a very different conclusion.